He goes by the name Twatterbaas, a highly influential social media account on X that has the ear of the world's richest person.
And until such time as we find out what South Africa is doing, they're taking away land, they're confiscating land.
And thus the Trump administration too.
We cannot make as if, this is just someone having fun with their cell phone on Twitter. This is very dangerous. It sparks a lot of backlash. It sparks a lot of hate and ill feeling.
Espousing right-wing racist views, fueling global misinformation about the state of South Africa, Twatterbaas is finally exposed by News 24 investigative journalist Kyle Cowan next.
These posts without nuance, sort of with these inherently racist sort of undertones and overtones, are what makes this such a problematic account. Over and above the fact that Elon Musk subscribes to his account and we can trace that link directly to Donald Trump, this person has deeply problematic views about South Africa, about South Africans.
Later in the show, corruption catches up to a former deputy mayor convicted of fraud. And finally, one woman treks South Africa on foot to find a cure for her husband's rare disorder.
To stay tuned to The Lead for every edition, hit the follow and subscribe buttons on our Spotify, Apple, and YouTube podcast channels.
If you'd like to be in our next edition, you can mail us, thelead@24.com. My name's Graeme Raubenheimer, your host. Let's chat all this and more right here on The Lead on News 24. Twatterbaas, whose deeply racist views on X have a subscriber and the platform's owner, Elon Musk himself, has finally been revealed to the public. It's 46-year-old Sebastiaan Jooste. He currently runs a guest house in Gordons Bay in Cape Town. Jooste's a former farmer, but if you read his problematic X posts, he gives the impression that he's still one living in fear of imminent attack. We only know this today thanks to our investigative journalist, Kyle Cowan, who went to great lengths to uncloak the person steering massive misinformation about South Africa online. Kyle, thanks so much for your time. Welcome back to The Lead. That's 2 in a row for you. Incredible investigative work. Let's get into all of this right from the outset because there's a lot to talk about here. Which of Jooste's X posts first got your attention? I understand it was the one about the late AVB, Afrikaner Weerstandsbeweging leader Eugene de Blanche's murder, correct? There was this pic that was shared on X, formerly known as Twitter. It shows the back of a man's shirt reading 100% Boer. He's paying his respects in front of this flower-laden gate. To the extremists' farm that was following his 2010 murder. But that wasn't initially evident in this particular post that was shared by Twatterbaas. And that's what got you investigating this. Is that right?
No, so that was the first post that gave us a clue to his past identity or his past and where we might find more clues of him. But the first post that really caught my attention was actually a post by Elon Musk. It was in March this year. He had quoted Twatterbaas and said, it was a video of Julius Malema singing the very controversial song Kill the Boer, and he was saying, look, very few people know that there's actually a political party calling for white genocide in South Africa. And I thought this was a horribly disingenuous thing for him to say because, the debate around that song is obviously far more complicated than that. But I sort of filed it in, as a journalist, every day you see a million things and you just sort of file it in the back of your mind. But then that tweet of the mourner at Eugene de Blanche's gate near Ventersdorp, that was the tweet that sort of enabled us to go down a road that started to lift the lid a little bit so that we could understand who was running this account. Because the more you look at the account, the more problematic the views become. Earlier this year, there were a few reports on some relatively small online publications because of Elon Musk being a subscriber to the account. This was picked up, and the account was sort of labeled as an apartheid era sort of racist account. And I thought to myself, well, the man is posting about farm murders, farm attacks. There are some posts that are deeply problematic in terms of the accuracy of information and so on. But I didn't see anything immediately that sort of got that sort of waved waved a red flag. It's only when you really start digging a little bit deeper. And one of the posts specifically highlighted in those other media reports that I mentioned is a map that he shared of South Africa, of Africa, with South Africa in blue. And he sort of, what he says is that the only reason South Africa has a strong economy or the best economy in Africa, et cetera, is because of 4 and something million white people living in the country. And that post is deeply problematic for a number of reasons that we don't have to get into. But it's that sort of led us down this path. And now we had an area. We knew that this account was claiming that they were near Ventersdorp. So we could start narrowing down the search quite a lot.
And I thought it also pertinent, before we move on, is in the context of this post of the picture of the man mourning in front of the gate of the late RVB leader Eugene de Blanche. Twatterbaas then later in the February context of that picture being shared then goes on to describe the person that owned that farm as Oom Eugene. Now I wanted to just stop and pause to show that within the Afrikaans context, calling somebody an uncle or an oom has a level of affection to it. So right off the bat of it, you have Twatterbaas showing his colors a little bit. And I thought I wanted to add that by saying Oom Eugene, he's got some affection for the former leader of the RVB who had led bombings during the 1994 elections in which 20 people were killed.
Yeah, and it's also a term used for out of respect for elders. And I think it's you're very right. I think it's very important that is highlighted. One of the things about that post that really struck me, other than him revealing some geographical clues to his possible location, is also that it was posted initially and sort of created the impression that it had happened recently. Community notes, which you'll know well, you would have seen it on X if you spend any time on there, where other users correct information or what they perceive as misleading. That was added to the story. He then posts underneath it, calling Eugene Terblas Eugene. But the other very important thing to note, and it's just another very interesting thing about this tweet, is at that point, the family farm in that area, and we'll get to how exactly we found it, was sold. It had been sold 3 years before that murder happened. And so it's again, there's just so many questions about the probity of this version,
He's used a lot of blatantly vile, racist Afrikaans words in many of his X posts that you have since exposed. We are not going to repeat those things. No. How did he get away with this for so long? And give us some examples of the other posts that he had shared, some including, sharing the pictures of the old South African flag.
Yeah, so, let's start with that one, the old South African flag. He shares a meme, the distracted boyfriend meme, which is a very popular one. A man and his girlfriend are walking down the road. A pretty young woman walks past, and, the man is sort of looking back at her with that look on his face of, wow. And in this context, the current girlfriend was the new South African flag, and the pretty young woman was the old South African flag, which I think denotes a level of, as I say in my story, admiration or lusting after the old South African flag, which is, the quintessential symbol of the apartheid government. I think, very recently the courts in this country have ruled that gratuitous display, so unnecessary display of that flag, amounts to hate speech. We also referenced the other tweet that was picked up by some other media outlets, but then there are, for example, one that really, really troubled me is, other than, the 3 examples that we found of him using very derogatory names for black women, for example, there was one that he tweeted. It's a population growth graph, and a very inaccurate one, sort of denoting sort of showing the population growth of South Africa broken down by race. And in the caption of the tweet, in the actual post, above the pictures that he posts, he says that black people are breeding themselves into poverty. And there are so many, it's such, and I'm only repeating this, because of journalistic expression. Please don't misunderstand me. I do not agree with these views, but from a factual and data and statistical point of view, other than the inherent racism in that statement, it's also factually incorrect. Fertility rates are declining, have been for many, many years. There are, in fact, many reasons why actually showing population growth, particularly among black South Africans, is nearly impossible because of the way that censuses were conducted in the past. So that post immediately caught my eye. There were others where he sort of derided black people as being lazy, as being wanting handouts all the time, when, it's a common trope, it's a common racist trope that is shared. And particularly his eye was directed at black economic empowerment. And that's a whole different debate. But these posts without nuance, sort of with these inherently racist sort of undertones and overtones, are what makes this such a problematic account. Over and above the fact that Elon Musk subscribes to his account and we can trace that link directly to Donald Trump, this person has deeply problematic views about South Africa, about South Africans, and while it is not my place to speculate on his state of mind, I do think and I do believe that those views play a role in his belief that white farmers are the target of attack and murder at at a rate higher than other people in the country.
Yeah. And again, I believe on the basis of what you have just said, that him calling Eugene de Blanche Eugene speaks volumes of that through and through. So after some time posting these views, Jooste as Twatterbaas, he gets Elon Musk's attention. Elon Musk, of course, one of the biggest accounts on X, of course, that's not lost on us. He owns the platform. He becomes one of the subscribers to Twatterbaas. I don't know how that works out. I don't know how Elon, does he pay the subscriber fee every month? I thought
he does, yeah. $5.
$5, there you go. Okay. Then Elon starts sharing some of Twatterbaas's posts, and of course that's going to prop up his follower count and his impressions. So when you talk about impressions on social media, that's how many times, for example, other accounts see your posts, not necessarily engage with them. And of course, Elon Musk sharing those posts is going to be to a much, much, much bigger audience, right?
So Elon Musk, as we are talking now, has just shy of 220 million followers on X. He has the largest follower count on the platform. And what's very interesting here is that so the social media, we got a service provider to do analysis of the social media space around Twatterbaas and all of this. And what they found was there's this impressions metric. It's different from the one that you see underneath a tweet, which is the actual, and Twitter's own count of the views. And we found that, in the past, I believe it's just over a year, Musk's interactions with Twatterbaas has exposed Twatterbaas's tweets to about 4.3 billion people.
Yes.
That's an estimate. It's not 4.3 billion accounts or whatever, but 4.3 billion times an user on X had conceivably the opportunity to see some of Twatterbaas's content.
Yes, that's what you call impressions, right?
Yeah,
yes.
whether Elon reposted it or he posted it himself, and every tweet that Musk interacts with, every post that he interacts with, the impressions skyrocket, the views skyrocket. And, of course, some of the criticism would be, but, how can you possibly believe that what is being said on X could influence what Elon Musk is thinking or could influence what Donald Trump is thinking? Now, to be very clear, we are not making the allegation that Twatterbaas has directly and only him has influenced what Donald Trump thinks and believes. Our story very clearly says that he has reinforced misconceptions that Donald Trump and Elon Musk has about South Africa. And we have seen this with Elon. And, there's actually a former Twitter executive who told the Times of London, around Elon Musk has also been getting involved in some very crazy UK conspiracy theories. And this former Twitter executive, Bruce Daisley, actually said, Elon Musk has been radicalized by his own platform. And I think
it's so well put. It's really well put.
and I think it's so true. Even in this example, this debate around white genocide fits so neatly into the white right and white supremacists' idea of the world, especially American ones, because South Africa is this sort of unique example of where white rule was instituted. It was broken down. So now they have victims. They have victims to say, South Africa white people in South Africa are being, they're being oppressed. They're being, especially white Afrikaans people. And the reality is, of course, that white Afrikaans people, for the majority, not all of them, for the majority, find themselves in some of the most privileged living conditions and jobs and things, in the country.
Absolutely.
That's a debate that we could probably have for 4 days and still not reach a consensus with some of these people. And it's important to note that this victimhood mentality and framing is very important to engagement and narrative driving. And I think, and this is my personal belief, that this sort of intellectual dishonesty that Jooste has displayed, that many of these white right accounts display, white supremacist accounts rather display, I think that sort of intellectual dishonesty does more damage to the debate than allowing people to really understand what the issues are, to confront the very real problem of how vulnerable people living on farms are and what we as a country need to do to address that.
Absolutely. I just want to quickly say one point, and historians, authors like Herman Guillaume have basically found within historical records that apartheid was 100% influenced by the segregated South experience within the US context and the Jim Crow laws. I think we can leave that there, but that's a very pertinent historic nugget to talk about that historical connection between South African colonialism and the US, right? Musk then obviously is that bridge between sharing these posts that thus gets the Trump administration's attention, right? Whilst that's happening, you looked a little bit closer at Twatterbaas's posts and, his current experience. Was he living on a farm? That informed a lot of the posts that he had been sharing. And essentially, you as and many other great investigative journalists in this country used tried and trusted techniques to be able to track him down, to see what context he was currently living in, to form the basis of the posts that he was sharing, before you eventually got him at his guest house in Gordons Bay and you confront him in person. Take us through that process of finding out where he was in the world of South Africa.
I would love to take credit for all of that, but I must say that I had some assistance from a person that is far cleverer than I am with these online OSINT investigations. But I did do my fair share, not going to shy away. But the initial clues I was helped with. The person has asked, obviously, not to be named, which is why I'm not thanking them directly. But what we did after that Ventersdorp post where he talks about Eugene and posts about the mourner at the gate, if you go and look at his account and look at other times he's mentioned Ventersdorp, because in that post he says, it's a 20-minute or 30-minute drive away from our family farm. So you're thinking, okay, Ventersdorp, that area around there, Colony, all of those towns, very agricultural area, been in the news quite recently for also, some terrible scenes at farms and murders and so on. And if you start looking through his account and using search functions, you start finding references to other towns in that area. So what we were able to do is we were able to triangulate that the farm was somewhere between Ventersdorp, Colini, and Pitfontein, which is an area in the northwest, about an hour and a half's drive from Johannesburg. Then there was one very important post where Jooste, through Twatterbaas, actually posted a satellite image of the farm and said, this was our family farm. We built this from nothing, and sort of makes a statement that, we're not going anywhere. We are proud farmers. So using that satellite image, you're able to, once you have triangulated the areas that he's mentioned, we were able to identify that farm. And then there's something else, and I'm not actually sure a lot of people are aware of this, but in South Africa, any property transaction, any property ownership is publicly available by law. Any person can go to the deeds office. Well, apparently we're not allowed to go there in person anymore as we used to back in the day. Now it's all online, but you can log online if you have an internet connection. You can find out who owns the street across the road, the people next to you, and I think it costs about 30 or 40 Rand, depending on what service you use. And using these deeds office records, once we have the GPS location of the farm, we're able to determine who the current owner and previous owners of that property were. And from there, we had a list of 3 names. two companies and their directors, and then the Jooste family. And we were able to then narrow this down further because of posts that Jooste had put on the Twatterbaas account, things like posting a picture of a drink at the Port Alfred Marina saying, oh, it's so great that this is a 20-minute drive from my farm. And other things, he posted a picture of a police when you open a case at the police station, you get an SMS confirmation from them with the case number and some other relevant details. He had attempted to redact that on, using photo editing software on his phone. But if you have that picture, and I really must thank my OSINT expert friend who showed me that you can actually just move around the contrast and so on and lift up the words underneath.
I didn't know that, and it's really expert stuff.
Yes, I mean, I was blown away when they showed me this. I was like, this is actually so, now that I know it's actually so simple, but if you hadn't known about it before, you obviously would never have tried that. And in that, the police case number was revealed, as well as the location, the police station where the case was opened for stock theft. And that allowed us to confirm that Sebastiaan Jooste was the person who opened the case. He is very clearly claiming that this is his case that he opened on the Twatterbaas account. Other geographical and biographical information on his wife's also anonymous Twitter account. We were able to then, with the deeds office records, narrow it down and confirm over time, as he has posted pictures of farms, etc., it follows the deeds office property ownership records. Now, to be very, very clear, Sebastiaan Jooste didn't own the properties himself. His father and mother owned the properties. His father's name is also Sebastiaan Jooste. They owned the farm near Colini up until 2007, from the early 1980s to 2007. They then moved to a place called Caredo in the Eastern Cape, and then to a farm called Wolf's Crag near Grahamstown. Now, all of those properties, I am able to tell you the names of those properties because the properties have been sold and the Jooste family no longer lives there. They were sold for substantial amounts of money, more than 20 million, the last farm. And then the guest house in Gordons Bay was purchased. And Jooste, again, the final sort of confirmation was looking at company records. We were able to see that Jooste and his wife, Sebastiaan Jooste Jr. and his wife were added as directors onto the company that runs the guest house around June 2024. Based on some pictures that were posted, it looks like they arrived in Cape Town around that time. So we were able to determine with relative certainty, well, I'd say 99.999% certainty, that this account was owned by Sebastiaan Jooste, that he was no longer a farmer, although he had farmed on his father's properties for nearly 20 years. And then, of course, the final confirmation came when we sent written questions after going to see Mr. Jooste in Gordons Bay. We sent written questions, and we got a response from his attorney, who's Mr. Vian Spies of Hurter Spies Attorneys, who also, do extensive work for AfriForum on many of these issues. And they then confirmed it was his account. They sort of said, well, he initially denied it because he had good reason to deny it, but without telling us what that good reason is.
And what was his demeanor when you finally caught up to Jooste at that Gordons Bay guest house and you first met him? He denied that he was behind this account. And what was his arguments in person with you at the time? And what was his personality like? What did you glean from the engagement?
He was extremely friendly, extremely polite. We shook hands, greeted. I introduced myself. I said, this is what I'm working on. I'm here to ask you about your Twitter account, Twatterbaas. And he said, no, it's not mine. He even showed me his phone. There was no X app on the phone. It seemed to be a pretty new iPhone. There was no X app on there. We then departed and met again a few minutes later at a coffee shop nearby, where we had a longer discussion. And he at that point said to me, he believes that the account is run by one of his friends, using pictures from his old Facebook account and pictures from WhatsApp groups, etc. He then got back to me a day or so after to say, he's since left these WhatsApp groups and so on, because he had given me an undertaking. I said to him, well, if it's not your account, then you need to tell me whose it is. Or at the very least, put me down the path to show to me who were members of these WhatsApp groups that you had referenced, where, and he could not do that. We then sent him written questions because I believed at the time that he was lying to me. I remember remarking to my colleague who went with me to take pictures that day. I remember remarking to her that I believe that this man has lied to me. And I then got the confirmation a few days later. But he was enormously polite, and he seemed actually genuinely shocked when we arrived there. But another point I just need to make here, the identification was possible because he had posted an enormous amount of geographical and biographical information.
Yes.
One other user on X actually correctly identified the guest house where his wife is sitting on the porch drinking a glass of wine. It is not hard to find this person. Journalistically, we have a higher bar because we have to obviously prove what we are saying. But for any person who has an internet connection, who has an X account, I think it's relatively easy to figure out who this person is and where he lives. And that is quite crucial because, you know, at the end of the day, I almost feel, based on everything that he's posted, that Mr. Jooste probably wanted to be identified as linked to this account. I'm not saying that's my personal view, just based on my past experience in trying to track down anonymous X accounts, Twitter accounts. It is enormously difficult unless the person running the account makes a major error. And in this case, there was actually more information than we needed in the end to positively identify him.
Okay, so then the lawyer comes along, Vian Spies correct, and he basically admits, yes, this account belongs to my client. And then I thought, quite interestingly, he shares the following quote with you, that he agrees that his client has shared posts that are quote unquote robust and may spark public debate. What? That's putting it mildly.
Yeah, I think that's putting it very mildly. You know, Mr. Spies's role here, I'm quite sure, is to protect his client. And his client has made it clear, and through our questions, we made it very clear that we were going to identify him as linked to this account. And I think Mr. Spies took umbrage with that and you know, threatened us with litigation and complaints and regulations and all sorts of the normal threats that we get every time we try and publish a story that no one is very happy with. You know, and in this case, however, I think what was very important, and it was important enough that we mentioned it in the story, there was no direct denial of racism or hate speech. That quote that you read there was in response to a series of tweets that we had screenshotted and saved prior to confronting Mr. Jooste. He has deleted 6 of those 8 that we put to them, and he deleted them sometime after receiving our written questions, and you know, his attorney being involved. In all, we believe he deleted about 600 posts. Some of them were tweets that we have talked about here, you know, that were inherently or, you know, subliminally racist. And I think that his deletion of those posts is a recognition of their problematic nature.
Well, look, just went on to X very quickly, just out of sheer interest in Twatterbaas. He posted about 17 hours ago, quote unquote, I'll just read it just verbatim in the context of our discussion. As a white South African, I have a question to my fellow black South Africans and our President Ramaphosa. Which land exactly do you intend to take without zero compensation? All white-owned land, some white-owned land, no white-owned land, state land, blah, 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 blah. You can go and look for yourself. In response to your reporting, there has been a huge number of social media accounts, some behind, you know, sharing profile pictures that don't represent who's necessarily behind these accounts. Some of these accounts are anonymous. Some others, perhaps the people that are steering them, they've really come out for you, accusing you of doxing this particular individual. If you don't know what doxing is, it's you know, publishing the personal information of people with gross intent or whatever the case may be. Your response to what has been a sharp reaction here?
No, it's interesting. I obviously read these things. I look at them. I think that the way that I've been responded to says far more about the people running and hiding behind anonymous accounts than it says about me or my work. One of the most common ones is, oh, you've spent so much time looking at this, but you have not, why don't you investigate government corruption or ANC malfeasance? And, you know, it's quite funny. If you just click over to News 24's website, you'll see that I'm part of an investigations team that has done enormous amounts of work on government corruption, including the president, the deputy president, ministers. So, you know what? I don't want to sound toxic about this, but these people don't scare me. I think, you know, this story, half and half, was a side project for me. I have many other things to do every day, and this was something that came across my radar. And out of interest, because we feel it is in the public interest and because it is important for South Africans to know that what you see online is not necessarily always a reflection of reality. We felt that this story was important to pursue, and we will continue to pursue it. I don't think that we have to try and explain to people that in the modern era, what you post online can have serious effects for not only for yourself, but also for the people around you. And it is not my responsibility to police every single thing that is posted online. But, my message to people who have called me names, who've said all these things, Graeme, I don't care. I have other things to do.
Absolutely. And just to prove your point for the other stories that you do follow, right here on The Lead, we're on episode 27 as we speak, and you and I have had two other conversations. One of them was the episode Minister Thembi Simelane Vitrovian and the Kusile cash grab, and the other episode, of course, was our most recent one, the Mashatile hit, that wasn't with you, Kyle, of course. Ending off, any other responses from Twatterbaas, Meneer Jooste? Has he said anything to you? It really appears as if he's probably going to continue tweeting here, although now he's going to be exposed for what he really is down to it all, because your publication will live on.
Yes, and I fully expect that there will be complaints, whether of a legal nature or with the press ombud and the press council. And my sincere belief in this is that I welcome any complaint about my work. I'm ready to robustly challenge those complaints. I stand by what we've written, which is, of course, the entire point. There's a reason why myself as a journalist, I put myself out there. I put my name next to these things because I want you to believe that I've put work into verifying the information that I publish. I do not hide behind pseudonyms on X because I believe that sunlight is the best disinfectant. And if we continue to have debates that are intellectually dishonest, and we do them in a way that is harmful to others and to their dignity, that we as a country are going to struggle to resolve a debate that is enormously important and that is enormously sensitive for many, many people. We cannot trivialize this. We cannot make as if, this is just someone having fun with their cell phone on Twitter. This is very dangerous. It sparks a lot of backlash. It sparks a lot of hate and ill feeling. And we have to be, as South Africans, I think, collectively, far more responsible and take far more accountability for the way that we talk about such a very sensitive issue. And this includes Mr. Malema. Mr. Malema, I think, in my personal view, is wrong to continue singing that song, no matter what the courts have found. But at the same time, we also cannot tolerate intellectually dishonest discourse from either side of this debate. And I think we all need to just take a big step back and understand that we are discussing something that has caused generational trauma to many, many people. And we have to discuss this in a way that is sensitive to other people's feelings, sensitive to their dignity, and also in a common sense way where we can agree on the facts and take the debate forward from there.
Because at the end of it all, here's a man running a Gordons Bay guest house, espousing all of these views that are reaching the ears of the man in charge of the White House in the United States of America, that is affecting how diplomatic relationships happen and how macroeconomics comes into play and how that affects the markets and whether or not that can possibly, at the end of the day, also exacerbate inequalities. I won't even go down that. All I'll say is this, Kyle, fantastic work. Thank you so much for your time on The Lead. And thank you so much for chatting to us and detailing a lot of the work that goes into massive investigations like these. I'm looking forward to what comes next.
Thank you, Graeme, and thank you for having me.
To our trending topic now, the former deputy mayor of the Cederberg local municipality in the Western Cape is facing sentencing soon after being convicted of fraud. Benjamin Sass has been found guilty of diverting funds in a 20,000 rand school uniform tender. In 2018, a local company had won the Back to School project contract to supply some 100 underprivileged pupils with uniforms. But according to prosecutors, Zas soon informed the company to refund the money in cash and in person outside a local supermarket. Zas claimed the city manager told him to do this, but that public office bearer testified that his department only signed off on the invoice to say that the goods were received, which didn't happen. Prosecutors pushed that in line with the Municipal Finance Management Act, no one may interfere with the municipality's supply chain management, which is what Zas has now been found guilty of. It all sounds like Corruption 101 to me. Sentencing is a month from now in the Bellville Commercial Crimes Court. That story thanks to Noxolo Sibia. And finally, a woman will be making the massive trek between Johannesburg and Cape Town on foot this week. That's all to raise awareness about her husband's rare condition. In 2021, Sean Telecrum was diagnosed with Dercum's disease, which causes extremely painful growths or lipomas all over the body. Since then, the successful accountant lost his job, upending his family life, and needs constant medication just to get by. Now, his wife Nicole hopes her 1,400-kilometer journey between the two big cities, starting this Wednesday, will bring more eyes to the research into this uncommon disorder. Inspired by Japanese TikTok star Gump Suzuki, who had undertaken a similar trip, Nicole says she's not doing this for fun, but to walk for those who can't, like Sean. She's dreaming of raising funds to help fight Dercum's disease and hopes you'll lend your support by joining her on foot in her journey. You can follow her on TikTok too at Nicole Telecrum. That's Telecrum with a K. That story, compliments of our good news editor, Paul Herman. Well, from some ex-misinformation detective work to a dodgy ex-deputy mayor, it's never a dull day in Mzansi. We'd love more of your mails, comments. You can send us your voice notes at thelead@24.com. And to be reminded of our next edition, you can hit the follow and subscribe buttons on our Spotify, Apple, and YouTube podcast channels. We've only got one more episode to follow this week. Unfortunately, that's due to all the public holidays. But from next week, it'll be Monday to Thursday, like clockwork at 7 p.m. Well, my name's Graeme Raubenheimer, and so long as there's news, we'll have the lead.